The alarm clock screamed at 5:30 a.m., pulling Emily Carter from a restless sleep. She slapped the button with practiced irritation, her hand moving automatically in the darkness of her studio apartment. The Chicago cold had seeped through the old windows during the night, and she could see her breath in the morning air. The radiator clanked and hissed, offering more noise than warmth. Emily sat up, her body already protesting the day ahead. 26 years old, and she felt 40. Her reflection in the bathroom mirror told the same story it had told for the past 3 years. Dark circles under hazel eyes, blonde hair that needed a proper cut she couldn't afford, and the perpetual exhaustion that came from working double shifts at a place that barely paid minimum wage. The shower water took forever to warm up. She stood there shivering, waiting for the ancient pipes to cooperate. Through the thin walls she could hear her neighbor's television already blaring the morning news. Another day in her cramped corner of Chicago's struggling west side, where dreams came to fade and bills arrived with ruthless punctuality. By 6:15, Emily was dressed in her uniform, black pants that had seen better days, a white shirt she'd ironed the night before, and non-slip shoes that had lost their cushioning months ago. She grabbed her coat, not warm enough for late November, but it was what she had, and headed out into the gray Chicago dawn. The bus ride to Rosie's diner took 40 minutes, including a transfer. Emily watched the city wake up through the scratched windows, delivery trucks making their rounds, early shift workers trudging to the L train, homeless individuals huddled in doorways seeking shelter from the biting wind. The sky was the color of concrete, heavy with the promise of rain or perhaps the season's first snow. Rosie's diner sat on a corner in a neighborhood that had never quite recovered from the economic downturn. The neon sign buzzed and flickered, missing letters that nobody bothered to fix. The place had been there for 30 years, and it looked every day of it. Cracked vinyl booths, a counter with permanent coffee stains, and a kitchen that barely passed health inspections. Emily pushed through the door at 7 o'clock sharp. The breakfast rush was already building. Construction workers needing coffee and eggs before heading to job sites, office workers grabbing something quick, regulars who had nowhere else to go. "You're late," Jerry Collins barked from behind the counter. Emily glanced at the clock on the wall. 7 o'clock exactly. "I'm right on time, Jerry. On time is late. Early is on time." He was a large man in his 50s, with a perpetual scowl and a voice that carried across the entire diner. His apron was stained, his comb-over was fooling nobody, and his management style could generously be described as hostile. "Good morning to you too," Emily muttered, tying her apron around her waist. "What was that?" "Nothing. Where do you want me?" "Tables." Sandra called in sick again. Jerry's tone suggested he didn't believe Sandra was sick, and he was probably right. "And the coffee's running low. And table 6 has been waiting for 10 minutes. Get moving." Emily grabbed the coffee pot and began her rounds. Table 6 was occupied by Mr. Peterson, a regular who came in every morning and never tipped. "Sorry for the wait, Mr. Peterson. What can I get you?" "Took you long enough. I'll have the usual. And this coffee better be fresh." It wasn't fresh. It had been sitting there since Jerry made it at 6:30, growing bitter and stale. But Emily poured it with a smile she didn't feel and took his order to the kitchen. The morning rush was brutal. Order after order, complaint after complaint, and Jerry's voice cutting through it all, criticizing everything she did. The coffee was too cold. The eggs were taking too long. She'd forgotten to refill the ketchup bottles. She hadn't smiled enough at table 3. "This isn't a charity, Carter," Jerry shouted during a brief lull. "Customers want service with a smile. You look like you're at a funeral." Emily bit her tongue. She needed this job. The rent was due in a week, her student loans were drowning her, and the night classes she'd been taking at the community college, trying to build toward something better, had eaten through what little savings she'd had. By 10 o'clock, the breakfast rush had faded into the late morning coffee crowd. Emily's feet ached, her lower back was screaming, and she'd earned maybe $20 in tips. She was refilling sugar dispensers when it happened. Table 8, a businessman in an expensive suit typing on his laptop while his coffee went cold. Emily had brought him 3 refills without him looking up once. She approached with the pot for a 4th refill, carefully reaching over his computer. The pot slipped. Not much, just a small splash, barely a few drops landing on the table beside his laptop. Nothing touched his computer. Nothing touched him. But Jerry saw it from across the diner. "Carter, in the back, now!" Emily's stomach dropped. She set down the coffee pot, her hands trembling slightly, and walked toward the kitchen. The businessman hadn't even noticed, still absorbed in his work. But Jerry was red-faced and furious. "Do you have any idea how expensive that man's suit is?" Jerry hissed once they were in the back, though his voice was loud enough for half the diner to hear. "You could have ruined his computer. We could have been sued." "Jerry, it was barely a drop." "Nothing. I don't want to hear your excuses. You're careless, you're slow, and frankly, I'm tired of your attitude." "My attitude?" Emily felt something crack inside her, 3 years of frustration rising to the surface. "I've been working here for 3 years, Jerry. I'm never late. I cover shifts when other people call in. I put up with, you're replaceable, Carter. There are 100 girls who'd be grateful for this job." The words hung in the air between them. Emily stared at her boss, this small, mean man who'd made her life miserable for 3 years, and something shifted. The fear of losing the job, the fear that had kept her silent through countless humiliations, suddenly felt less important than her dignity. "You know what, Jerry? Maybe one of those 100 girls should have this job." She untied her apron and dropped it on the prep counter. Jerry blinked, apparently surprised. "What are you doing?" "I'm taking my break. I'll finish my shift because I'm professional, unlike some people. But we're going to have a conversation about respect." She walked out before he could respond, pushing through the back door into the alley behind the diner. The cold November air hit her face, and she took deep, shaking breaths. Her hands were trembling, from anger, from fear, from the adrenaline of finally standing up for herself. Emily pulled out her phone and leaned against the brick wall. She had 4 hours left on her shift. 4 hours of Jerry's passive-aggressive comments, pointed looks, and the knowledge that he'd make her life even more miserable than before. The afternoon was worse than she'd imagined. Jerry put her on the least desirable tasks, cleaning the grease trap, scrubbing the floor behind the coffee machines, organizing the walk-in freezer. He barely spoke to her, which was somehow worse than the yelling. The other staff members avoided her, sensing the tension and not wanting to be associated with someone who'd challenged the boss. By 3 o'clock, when her shift finally ended, Emily was exhausted in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. She collected her things from her locker, ignored Jerry's pointed silence, and walked out into the gray afternoon. The bus ride home felt longer than usual. The sky had darkened with storm clouds, and the first drops of cold rain began to fall as she walked the 3 blocks from the bus stop to her apartment building. By the time she climbed the stairs to her third-floor studio, she was soaked and shivering. Emily dropped her bag by the door, peeled off her wet clothes, and stood under the hot shower until the water began to cool. She wrapped herself in her worn bathrobe and sat on her bed, staring at the walls of her tiny apartment. This was her life. A studio apartment with a kitchenette barely big enough to turn around in, a bathroom where the toilet ran constantly, and a single window that looked out onto another brick building. Her furniture was second-hand. A futon that served as both couch and bed, a small table with 1 chair, a dresser she'd found on the curb and repainted. Her college degree hung on the wall, a bachelor's in business administration that had promised opportunity and delivered debt. Emily opened her laptop, another relic from her college days, held together with hope and duct tape. She'd been applying to better jobs for 2 years, office positions, administrative assistant roles, anything that would get her out of the service industry. The rejection emails had become routine. "We've decided to move forward with other candidates. Your qualifications are impressive, but we'll keep your resume on file." She pulled up her email account and stared at the screen. The cursor blinked in the composition window. She'd thought about quitting 100 times, but tonight felt different. Tonight she'd actually stood up to Jerry. Tonight she'd seen clearly what her life had become, and decided she couldn't accept it anymore. Emily began to type, her fingers moving faster as the words flowed out. "Jerry, I quit. Effective immediately. I've spent 3 years at Rosie's Diner, and in that time, I've never been late, never stolen, never caused a problem. I've covered countless shifts when others called in. I've dealt with difficult customers with patience. I've worked overtime without complaint, and in return, I've been yelled at, humiliated, and treated like I'm disposable. You criticized everything I did, no matter how well I did it. You created an environment where fear is the primary motivator, where staff members are too scared to take bathroom breaks or ask questions. Today you humiliated me in front of customers over a drop of coffee that didn't even hit anything. That was the moment I realized that no job is worth sacrificing your self-respect. I deserve better than this. Everyone who works for you deserves better than this. Maybe someday you'll realize that treating people with basic human dignity isn't a weakness. It's the foundation of good leadership. I won't be returning to Rosie's Diner. Please mail my final paycheck to my address on file. Emily Carter. She read it over once, her heart pounding. 3 years of frustration condensed into a few paragraphs. It felt good. It felt right. It felt terrifying. Emily pulled up her contacts and found Jerry's email address, jerry.collins.rosiesdiner.com. She copied it into the to field, her finger hovering over the send button. What would she do for money? How would she pay rent? The questions circled in her mind, but they felt distant compared to the immediate need to reclaim some piece of herself. She hit send. The email whooshed away into the digital void, and Emily felt a wave of relief wash over her. It was done. Whatever happened next, she'd made a choice. She'd taken control of something in her life. Emily closed her laptop and collapsed back on her futon, suddenly exhausted. The rain drummed against her window and the room had grown dark. She should get up, make some dinner, figure out her budget, start applying for new jobs with renewed urgency. Instead, she pulled a blanket over herself and closed her eyes. Tomorrow would be soon enough to figure out the consequences. Tonight, she just wanted to feel the freedom of having stood up for herself. She fell asleep as the storm intensified outside, rain lashing against the windows and thunder rumbling in the distance. Chicago's November weather was unforgiving, but inside her small apartment, Emily Carter slept more peacefully than she had in years. The next morning, Emily woke to her alarm with a strange feeling. It took her a moment to identify it as relief. No work today. No Jerry. No diner. The freedom was intoxicating and absolutely terrifying in equal measure. She made coffee in her small French press, one of the few nice things she owned, a graduation gift from her mother. The morning light filtered through her window, weak and gray, but without the urgency of having to rush to work, it felt almost peaceful. Emily opened her laptop to begin the job search in earnest. Her inbox loaded, and she saw the usual spam, a few promotional emails, and, unexpectedly, a response to her resignation email sent just an hour ago. The sender, jerry.colino.marinoenterprises.com. Emily frowned. That wasn't Jerry's email address. The domain was wrong. She opened the email, her confusion growing. Ms. Carter, your email was illuminating. I appreciate candor, especially when it comes with such conviction. It's rare to encounter someone willing to speak truth to power, regardless of the personal cost. While I'm clearly not the recipient you intended, I found myself impressed by your courage and your integrity. People like you are valuable, more valuable than you apparently realize. I have a position that might interest you. The work is demanding, but you'd be compensated fairly and treated with the respect you clearly haven't been receiving. If you're interested in discussing this opportunity, come to my office tomorrow at 10 a.m., address below. Interesting mistakes sometimes lead to interesting opportunities. V. Marino Enterprises, 875 North Michigan Avenue, Suite 4200 Chicago. IL. Emily read the email 3 times, her coffee growing cold in her hands. She'd sent her resignation to the wrong person. A typo. Collins instead of Colino. But who was V. Marino? And why would a stranger offer her a job based on an angry resignation email? She Googled Marino Enterprises Chicago. The results were sparse. A professional website listing import and export services with no specific details. A business registration showing the company had been established 15 years ago. A few mentions in Chicago business publications. Always brief, always vague. No social media presence. No employee reviews on job sites. She searched for V. Marino Chicago. Even less information. No LinkedIn profile, no Facebook page. Nothing that would give her a sense of who this person was. The address was in the Magnificent Mile area, one of Chicago's most expensive districts. Whatever Marino Enterprises was, it had serious money. Emily sat back, staring at her screen. This was strange. Possibly too strange. A mysterious businessman offers her a job based on an email that wasn't even meant for him. It sounded like the beginning of a cautionary tale her mother would tell. But then again, what did she have to lose? She'd just quit her job. Her rent was due in 6 days. She had maybe $300 in her checking account and another $200 in savings. She needed work, and she needed it soon. The address was public, a major office building in broad daylight. She could go, hear what the offer was, and leave if it felt wrong. It was at least worth investigating. Emily looked around her tiny apartment, at her second-hand furniture and her pile of bills on the counter. She thought about Jerry's face, about 3 years of being treated as disposable, about rejection emails and student loan statements, and a future that felt like it was closing in rather than opening up. Sometimes, she thought, you have to take a chance, even if it seems crazy. Especially if it seems crazy. She hit reply on the email. Mr. Marino, I'll be there tomorrow at 10 a.m. Thank you for the opportunity. Emily Carter. She sent it before she could second-guess herself, then immediately began wondering what she'd just agreed to. The rest of the day was spent in anxious preparation, researching what little she could find about Marino Enterprises, picking out her one professional outfit, a black pantsuit she'd bought for college interviews and barely worn since. That night, lying in the darkness of her apartment, Emily stared at the ceiling and wondered if she was being brave or foolish. The rain had returned, tapping against her window like a warning. Tomorrow, she'd find out what kind of opportunity came from a mistaken email. Tomorrow her life would change in ways she couldn't possibly imagine. The city rumbled and hummed outside her window, 8 million stories unfolding simultaneously in the Chicago darkness. And Emily Carter, former waitress, was about to become part of a story far stranger than any she'd dreamed. Emily barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, her mind raced with questions and scenarios. Who was V. Marino? What kind of company operated with such deliberate anonymity? Why would a complete stranger offer her a job based on an angry resignation email meant for someone else? At 4 a.m., she gave up on sleep and made coffee. The apartment was cold, and she wrapped herself in a blanket while sitting at her small table, watching the city wake up through her window. Chicago before dawn had a particular quality, quiet but expectant, the calm before millions of lives collided in the daily rush. By 7, Emily was showered and staring at her closet. The black pantsuit was her only option for something this formal. She paired it with a white blouse she'd hand-washed the night before and her only pair of real heels, purchased for job interviews that had gone nowhere. Looking at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the person staring back. For 3 years, she'd worn stained uniforms and non-slip shoes. This version of herself, professional, put together, felt like a costume. The L train to downtown was crowded with morning commuters. Emily stood pressed against other passengers, clutching the pole and trying not to wrinkle her suit. She watched the city transform through the train windows as they moved from her working-class neighborhood toward the gleaming towers of downtown Chicago. Michigan Avenue emerged like a different world. Designer stores lined the streets, their windows displaying clothes that cost more than Emily's monthly rent. Business people in expensive suits walked with purpose, briefcases in hand, Bluetooth earpieces conducting deals. Luxury cars navigated the traffic. This was the Chicago of postcards and tourism brochures, so different from the Chicago she knew. Number 875 North Michigan Avenue was a stunning glass tower that seemed to touch the gray November sky. Emily stood on the sidewalk, craning her neck to see the top, feeling suddenly very small. The building's entrance was all polished marble and gleaming brass with a security desk staffed by 2 guards in crisp uniforms. She checked her phone. 9:45 a.m. 15 minutes early. Her mother's voice echoed in her head. Early is on time is late. She smiled slightly. Jerry had said the same thing, though her mother had said it with love rather than contempt. Emily pushed through the revolving doors, her heels clicking on the marble floor. The lobby was impressive. Soaring ceilings, modern art on the walls, the hushed atmosphere of serious money. She approached the security desk, suddenly aware of how out of place she felt. "Good morning," she said, trying to sound confident. "I have an appointment with Mr. Marino at Marino Enterprises, Suite 4200. The security guard, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, checked his computer. "Name? Emily Carter." He typed, then nodded. "You're on the list. 42nd floor. Elevators are to your right. You'll need this visitor badge." He handed her a badge clipped to a lanyard. Emily thanked him and walked toward the elevators, her heart pounding. The 42nd floor. She'd never been that high in a building before. The elevator was empty, mirrored walls reflecting her nervous expression back at her. She pressed the button for 42 and watched the numbers climb. Her stomach dropped slightly as the elevator rose, smooth and fast. Through the glass back of the elevator, she could see Chicago spreading out below her, the city becoming a map of itself. The doors opened onto a reception area that took her breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of Lake Michigan and the city skyline. The furniture was all clean lines and expensive materials, leather and dark wood and brushed steel. The art on the walls looked like it belonged in a museum. Everything was pristine, professional, intimidating. A woman sat behind a curved reception desk, perfectly groomed with dark hair pulled into an elegant bun. She looked up as Emily approached, her expression professionally pleasant. "Good morning. How may I help you?" "I'm Emily Carter. I have a 10 o'clock appointment with Mr. Marino." The receptionist checked her computer, then smiled. "Of course. Please have a seat. Someone will be with you shortly." Emily sat in one of the leather chairs, trying not to fidget. The receptionist returned to her work, fingers flying across her keyboard. The office was quiet except for the muted sounds of the city 42 floors below, and the soft, classical music playing from hidden speakers. She noticed details as she waited. The receptionist answered the phone twice, her voice warm but giving nothing away. "Marino Enterprises, how may I direct your call?" A man in an expensive suit walked through, nodding to the receptionist without stopping. Another man emerged from an interior hallway, also well-dressed, carrying a leather portfolio. He glanced at Emily with brief curiosity before disappearing into an elevator. Everyone here moved with purpose, spoke in low voices, carried themselves with the confidence of people accustomed to power. Emily felt like an anthropologist observing a foreign culture. At exactly 10 o'clock, a door opened and a man stepped out. He was tall, probably in his early 30s, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to catalog everything in an instant. His suit probably cost more than Emily's car, back when she'd had a car. "Ms. Carter?" His voice was professionally neutral. Emily stood, smoothing her jacket. "Yes, I'm David. Mr. Marino will see you now. Please follow me." She followed him through the door into a hallway lined with abstract art and more floor-to-ceiling windows. Her heels sank into carpet so thick it felt like walking on clouds. They passed several closed doors. No nameplates, no signs indicating what happened behind them. David stopped at a door at the end of the hall and knocked once before opening it. "Ms. Carter is here, sir. Send her in." The voice was deep, controlled, with an accent that spoke of Chicago roots tempered by education and time. David stepped aside, and Emily walked into the office. If the reception area had been impressive, this was overwhelming. The office occupied a corner of the building, with windows on 2 walls offering breathtaking views of both the city and the lake. The furniture was minimalist, but clearly expensive. A massive desk that looked like a single piece of dark wood, leather chairs, a sitting area with a sofa and coffee table. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with leather-bound volumes. The art was original, not prints. Emily could see the texture of paint on canvas. And behind the desk, standing as she entered, was Vincent Marino. He was not what she'd expected, though she hadn't known what to expect. Probably in his early 40s, tall and well-built, with dark hair touched with gray at the temples. His suit was immaculate, charcoal gray with subtle pinstripes. But it was his face that caught her. Strong features, intelligent dark eyes that seemed to see more than they should, and an expression that was both welcoming and evaluating. "Ms. Carter, thank you for coming." He gestured to one of the chairs facing his desk. "Please sit." Emily sat, acutely aware of being studied. Vincent settled into his own chair, his movements economical and controlled. He picked up a paper from his desk. She recognized it as a printed copy of her resignation email. "I've read this several times," he said, a slight smile touching his lips. "It's remarkably honest. Refreshingly so." Emily wasn't sure how to respond. "It wasn't meant for you, obviously. Clearly. Though I'm curious, do you always communicate with such directness?" "Only when I'm fed up with being treated badly," she said, then wondered if that was too honest for a job interview. Vincent's smile widened slightly. "Good. I have no use for people who tell me what they think I want to hear. I'm surrounded by enough of those already." He set the paper down and leaned back in his chair, regarding her thoughtfully. "Tell me about yourself, Ms. Carter, beyond what I read in your spirited resignation." Emily took a breath. "There's not much to tell. I'm 26. I graduated from Roosevelt University 4 years ago with a degree in business administration. I've been working at Rosie's Diner for 3 years because the job market wasn't kind to graduates with my GPA and lack of connections. I've been trying to find something better, but," she shrugged, "you know how it is. Entry-level positions want 5 years of experience. And yet you stayed at a job where you were clearly unhappy for 3 years. Why?" "Because unhappy with a paycheck is better than happy and homeless," Emily said bluntly. "I have student loans, rent, bills. Until yesterday I couldn't afford the luxury of quitting." "What changed yesterday?" Emily met his eyes. "I realized that some things are more expensive than money, like your dignity, your self-respect. I couldn't afford to keep paying that price. Vincent nodded slowly, something like approval in his expression. You mentioned in your email that you'd covered shifts, worked overtime, dealt with difficult situations without complaint. That speaks to reliability and work ethic. I'm good at my job. Any job. I just haven't had the opportunity to prove it in a job that matters. And what would matter to you, Ms. Carter? In a job? Emily considered the question carefully. Respect? Fair compensation? The opportunity to use my skills for something more than refilling coffee cups. The chance to grow, to learn, to become better at what I do. Ambitious. Is that a problem? Not at all. Ambition without entitlement is valuable. Vincent stood and walked to the windows looking out over the city. Emily stayed seated, unsure if she should follow. I'm going to be direct with you, Vincent said, his back still to her. I need someone I can trust. Someone intelligent, discreet, and, most importantly, someone who isn't already part of my world. He turned to face her. My business requires absolute confidentiality. I deal with sensitive information, complex negotiations, people who value their privacy. Everyone in my existing circle has connections, relationships, loyalties that sometimes conflict with their work for me. You, Ms. Carter, are a blank slate. You have no ties to my industry, no preconceptions, no hidden agendas. Emily's wariness increased. What exactly is your industry, Mr. Marino? Import and export primarily. Some real estate holdings. Various investments. His tone was smooth, practiced. But the specifics of the business matter less than the requirements of the position, which is personal assistant. You'd manage my schedule, handle correspondence, conduct research, coordinate meetings, manage certain business matters that require someone I can trust implicitly. It sounded legitimate. Too legitimate, perhaps. Emily's instincts were firing warnings. Why me? You don't know me. That email could have been a fluke. I could be terrible at this kind of work. Vincent walked back to his desk, pulled out a folder and slid it across to her. That's your personnel file from Rosie's Diner. I had someone retrieve it this morning. Emily opened it, stunned. Her employment application, performance reviews, shift logs, everything was there. How did you? I have resources. Your file shows perfect attendance, only 2 sick days in 3 years, consistently positive customer feedback, before your boss started writing his own reviews of you, which were considerably less generous. You're punctual, reliable, and capable. The email simply confirmed what your record suggested. You have integrity. Emily felt a chill. The speed and thoroughness of this background check spoke to serious resources. This wasn't a normal business. Mr. Marino, I appreciate the offer, but I need to understand what I'm getting into. You've been vague about the actual work. You somehow obtained my employment records overnight, and everything about this situation feels unusual. You're right to be cautious. That's actually another point in your favor. Vincent sat down again, his expression becoming more serious. I'll be honest with you. To a point. My business operates in gray areas. Nothing I do is strictly wrong, but not everything is strictly standard either. I require discretion because my competitors would use any information against me. I require loyalty because betrayal in my industry has serious consequences. What kind of consequences? The end of careers, reputations destroyed, business relationships severed. He paused. I won't lie to you and say there's no risk. Working for me means entering a world where information is currency and trust is everything. But I also won't put you in danger. You'd be handling legitimate business matters, scheduling, correspondence, research, nothing that would compromise you legally or morally. Emily studied his face, trying to read between the words. He was being honest about being dishonest, acknowledging the shadows without defining them. It should have made her run. Instead, she found herself intrigued. What's the compensation? $75,000 annually to start. Health insurance, retirement contribution. After 6 months, if you're performing well, we renegotiate. Emily's breath caught. $75,000. She'd been making $22,000 at the diner, barely scraping by. This would change everything. She could pay off her loans, save money, maybe even take classes again. That's generous. Almost too generous. I pay for quality and loyalty. What you'd be learning, the access you'd have to my business operations and contacts, that's valuable. I'm paying you enough that leaving becomes difficult, which ensures you'll think twice before sharing what you know. It was manipulation, but he was being transparent about it. Emily appreciated the honesty, even as she recognized the trap being set. And if I want to leave after 6 months? You can leave whenever you want. I'd ask for 2 weeks' notice, and I'd expect you to honor the confidentiality agreement you'd signed. Beyond that, you're free to go. I don't believe in forcing people to stay. I believe in making them want to stay. Emily sat back, her mind racing. This was crazy. Everything about this situation screamed warning. The mysterious business, the vague descriptions, the almost absurd salary for what seemed like basic administrative work. But against that, she weighed her current situation. Broke, jobless, facing an uncertain future in a city that had no sympathy for people without resources. I need time to think about this, she said finally. Vincent nodded. Of course. I'd be concerned if you didn't. Take 24 hours. If you decide you're interested, call the number on my card. He pulled a business card from his desk and slid it across to her. Simple, elegant. Just a name and phone number. No title, no company name. Emily took the card, feeling the weight of expensive cardstock. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you really offer me this job? The real reason, not the official answer. Vincent smiled. A genuine smile this time, not the professional mask. Because your email reminded me that there are still people who choose principle over convenience. Because you walked away from a sure thing for an uncertain thing simply because it was the right thing to do. In my experience, people who do that once will do it again. And I need people around me who will do the right thing even when it costs them. It was a good answer. Maybe too good. Emily stood, and Vincent rose with her. Thank you for your time, Mr. Marino. Vincent, if you take this job, we'll be working closely together. Formality creates distance I don't need. Then thank you, Vincent. He walked her to the door, opened it. David will see you out. I hope to hear from you tomorrow, Emily. The use of her first name felt deliberate, personal. Emily nodded and followed David back through the quiet hallways, into the elevator, down to the lobby and out into the Chicago morning. The cold air hit her face like a splash of water. She walked without direction, processing what had just happened. The city moved around her, cars honking, people rushing past, the endless motion of urban life. She found herself at Millennium Park, sitting on a bench near the Bean sculpture, watching tourists take selfies and children play. Her phone buzzed. A text from her landlord. Rent due in 5 days, need to talk about late fees. Emily stared at the message, then at the business card in her hand. Vincent Marino's card felt like a key. To what, she wasn't sure. A better life? A dangerous mistake? Both? Another text, this time from her mother. How are you, honey? Haven't heard from you in a week. Call me when you can. She couldn't tell her mother about this. Her mother, who'd worked 2 jobs to help pay for college, who'd taught her the value of honest work and simple living. What would she say about her daughter considering working for a man who admitted to operating in gray areas? But then, what would she say about her daughter working for a man who'd humiliated her daily for 3 years? There were different kinds of compromise, different ways to lose yourself. Emily sat on that bench for over an hour, watching the city move around her, weighing her options. Finally, she stood and started walking back toward the L train station. She needed to go home, think clearly, make a list of pros and cons like she'd learned in business school. But deep down, beneath the rational analysis and careful consideration, she already knew what her answer would be. Sometimes the scariest choice is the only one that makes sense. Sometimes you have to trust that the person who sees your potential is right, even when you can't quite see it yourself. Chicago's wind cut through her coat as she waited for the train, but Emily barely felt it. Her mind was already in that corner office, sitting across from Vincent Marino, learning his world, becoming something more than she'd been. Tomorrow she'd make the call. Tonight, she'd allow herself to imagine a future that felt possible again. The train arrived and Emily stepped aboard, carrying Vincent's business card and the weight of a decision that would change everything. Behind her, the city's towers gleamed in the weak November sunlight, monuments to ambition and risk, and the belief that sometimes you have to leap before you know where you'll land. Emily spent the night in her apartment, staring at Vincent Marino's business card as if it might reveal secrets written in invisible ink. The simple white cardstock with embossed letters, just a name and number, felt heavier than it should. She made lists, pros and cons, risks and rewards, logical arguments for and against. The pro list was compelling. Real money, career opportunity, escape from the cycle of low-wage jobs. The con list was unsettling. Mysterious employer, vague job description, admitted operation in gray areas. At 2 a.m., unable to sleep, Emily opened her laptop and tried again to research Vincent Marino. She found a few more mentions this time, buried in Chicago business publications. His name appeared in connection with a commercial real estate development on the South Side, a project that had revitalized a struggling neighborhood. Another brief mention in a charitable donation list for a children's hospital. Nothing scandalous, but nothing revealing either. He existed in the public record as a shadow, present, but undefined. By morning, Emily had made her decision. Maybe it was desperation, or maybe it was intuition, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Vincent had been genuine in his offer. He'd been honest about being partially dishonest, which was more than most employers offered. At 9 o'clock, she dialed the number on the card. He answered on the second ring. "This is Vincent. It's Emily Carter. I'd like to accept your offer." A pause, then, "I'm pleased to hear that. Can you start today?" "Today?" Emily blinked. Yes, I suppose I can." "Good. Come to the office at 11. David will have paperwork ready for you to sign and we'll begin your orientation." "I'll be there." "Emily." His voice softened slightly. "You're making the right choice. I'll make sure of it." The line went dead. Emily stood in her small apartment, phone in hand, feeling like she'd just jumped off a cliff. The only question now was whether she'd learn to fly on the way down. By 10:45, Emily was back in the marble lobby of 875 North Michigan Avenue. This time the security guard recognized her and smiled as he prepared her badge. "Welcome back, Ms. Carter. 42nd floor." The elevator ride felt different today, less like ascending to an interview and more like rising toward her future. When the doors opened, David was waiting in the reception area. "Ms. Carter, right on time. Please follow me." He led her past the reception desk, down the hallway she'd walked the day before, but this time they stopped at a door near Vincent's office. David opened it to reveal a smaller but still impressive office. Windows overlooking the city, a clean desk with a new computer, filing cabinets, a small sitting area. "This is your office," David said. "Computer is set up with your login credentials. Username and temporary password are in this envelope. You'll change the password after your first login. Mr. Marino is particular about security protocols." Emily stepped inside, overwhelmed. Her own office. Windows. A door that closed. It was modest by the standards of this place, but compared to the diner, it was a palace. "I'll give you a few minutes to settle in," David continued. "Then we'll go over the paperwork and your initial responsibilities. Coffee? Please." "Black." David nodded and disappeared. Emily set her bag on the desk, her old canvas backpack looking shabby against the polished wood, and sat in the ergonomic chair. The computer monitor was large and new. The desk held a phone, a leather desk pad, a pen holder with expensive pens. Everything was ready, as if they'd known she'd say yes. The view from her window showed Lake Michigan stretching to the horizon, steel gray under the November sky. Sailboats were covered and docked for the winter. The water looked cold and unforgiving, but beautiful in its harsh way. David returned with coffee in a real ceramic mug, not styrofoam. "Here's your employment contract, non-disclosure agreement, and benefits information. Take your time reading everything. Mr. Marino insists that people understand what they're signing." Emily spent the next hour reading carefully. The employment contract was straightforward: $75,000 annual salary, 2 weeks paid vacation, health insurance with the company covering 80% of premiums, 401k matching up to 5%. Standard corporate benefits, surprisingly normal. The non-disclosure agreement was another matter. It was comprehensive and intimidating. She agreed not to discuss any aspect of Marino Enterprises' business operations, client lists, financial information, or internal communications with anyone outside the organization. The penalties for violation were severe: financial damages, legal action, criminal prosecution where applicable. Emily signed both documents, her hand only trembling slightly. David collected the paperwork, then pulled out a new phone from his jacket pocket. "Company phone. It's encrypted and monitored for security purposes. Use this for all business communications. Your personal phone stays personal. Mr. Marino respects boundaries." "Monitored by whom?" "IT security. They're looking for external threats, not policing your conversations, but assume anything you say on this phone could potentially be reviewed. Just good practice." Emily took the phone. New, expensive, probably worth more than 3 months of her old salary. "Now," David continued, sitting across from her, "let me explain how things work here. Mr. Marino values discretion above almost everything. If someone asks where you work, you say import-export and change the subject. You don't bring friends or family to this office. You don't discuss specific business matters outside these walls. Understood. Your primary responsibility is managing Mr. Marino's schedule and correspondence. He meets with various business associates, investors, property owners. Some meetings are straightforward business. Others are more delicate. You'll learn to distinguish between them, and you'll know which ones require extra discretion. What does extra discretion mean? David's expression was carefully neutral. It means some meetings don't get entered into the digital calendar. Some visitors are shown to private conference rooms rather than Mr. Marino's office. Some conversations, if you happen to overhear them, are immediately forgotten. Emily nodded slowly, understanding the subtext. Whatever Vincent's business truly involved, there were layers. Legitimate operations on the surface, something else underneath. You'll also conduct research for Mr. Marino, David continued. Market analysis, background checks on potential business partners, property valuations. He'll give you specific instructions. Your job is to be thorough, accurate, and fast. I can do that. I believe you can. One more thing. There are people in Mr. Marino's inner circle you need to know. Marco Russo is his head of security and oldest friend. If Marco tells you something, treat it as if Mr. Marino said it himself. Sophia Chen is our lead attorney. She handles contracts, negotiations, legal complications, and I coordinate operations. Think of me as a bridge between Mr. Marino and the various moving parts of his business. Emily absorbed the information, noting that David had carefully avoided giving anyone titles beyond their functional roles. Questions? David asked. Lots, but I assume they'll be answered as I learn the job. Smart. Mr. Marino is ready to see you now. Vincent's office felt less intimidating the second time. He was on the phone when Emily entered, gesturing for her to sit. She caught fragments of the conversation, something about shipping schedules and customs clearances, all seemingly legitimate business discussion. He ended the call and smiled at her. Emily, welcome to your first day. How are you feeling? Honestly, nervous and excited in equal measure. Good. The day you stop being nervous is the day you stop being careful. He stood and walked to a small bar cart near the window. Water? Something else? Water is fine. He poured 2 glasses from a crystal pitcher, added ice, brought one to her. The gesture was surprisingly personal coming from a boss. I'm going to be direct about how I work, Vincent said, settling into the chair beside her rather than behind his desk. I don't micromanage. I hire competent people and trust them to do their jobs, but I expect results, and I expect honesty. If you make a mistake, tell me immediately. I can fix mistakes. I can't fix cover-ups. Understood. You're going to see and hear things that might make you uncomfortable. Business conversations that seem aggressive. People who are clearly afraid of me. Situations that don't make complete sense from your perspective. He paused, his dark eyes serious. Your job isn't to judge or understand everything. Your job is to be reliable, discreet, and loyal. Can you do that? Emily considered her answer carefully. I can be reliable and discreet. Loyalty, that has to be earned. Vincent smiled. Fair enough, then let me start earning it. He stood and gestured for her to follow him to his desk. He pulled up a document on his computer screen, a detailed breakdown of his business holdings. This is what Marino Enterprises actually does. Emily scanned the document. Import-export was there, but so were real estate holdings across Chicago's south and west sides, investments in small businesses, ownership stakes in restaurants and retail stores, a logistics company, a construction firm. It's more diverse than I expected, Emily said. I don't believe in keeping all my resources in one place. Some of these businesses are highly profitable. Others barely break even but serve other purposes, providing jobs in neighborhoods that need them, establishing presence in communities, building relationships with people who might be useful allies. That almost sounds altruistic. Don't mistake strategy for charity. Everything I do serves a purpose, even if that purpose isn't immediately obvious. Vincent closed the document. Your first assignment is straightforward. I'm considering purchasing a building in Pilsen, a neighborhood on the Lower West Side. I need you to research the property's history, current market value, neighborhood development trends, and any potential complications with the acquisition. He handed her a file with the property address and basic information. I want a comprehensive report by end of day tomorrow. Use whatever resources you need. If you need access to databases or information services, David will set that up. Emily took the file, feeling the weight of real responsibility. I'll have it ready. I know you will. Vincent returned to his desk. One more thing. This Friday, I'm hosting a dinner meeting with potential business partners. I'll need you there to take notes and observe. It'll be your first real look at how I conduct business. Dress professionally. David will give you details on time and location. I'll be there. As Emily stood to leave, Vincent spoke again. Emily, you made a leap of faith accepting this position. I won't let you regret it. She nodded and left his office, her heart racing. Back in her own office, she opened the file on the Pilsen property and got to work. The next 2 days passed in a blur of intense learning. Emily researched the Pilsen property thoroughly, pulling public records, analyzing comparable sales, studying neighborhood development patterns, even driving out to see the building in person. It was a 3-story brick structure currently vacant, in a neighborhood that was gentrifying rapidly. Her report was detailed, professional, and highlighted both opportunities and risks. Vincent read it in silence while she stood in his office, trying not to fidget. Finally, he looked up. This is excellent work. Thorough, well-organized, insightful. You caught several issues I would have had to discover through my own research. Well done. Emily felt a rush of pride. Thank you. The dinner meeting is tomorrow night at 7. David has the details. It's at a private club downtown, Gianelli's. Have you heard of it? Emily shook her head. Exclusive membership, no public reservations. It's where Chicago's power brokers go when they want privacy. You'll meet people there who are influential in ways that don't show up in Forbes lists. He paused. You'll also meet Marco tomorrow. He'll be joining us. Your head of security. My oldest friend, actually. We grew up together on the South Side. He can seem intense, but he's loyal, and his judgment is sound. Friday evening arrived too quickly. Emily had agonized over what to wear, finally settling on a simple black dress she'd owned since college, and her only pair of good heels. She took a cab to the address David had provided, an expense she normally wouldn't allow herself, but showing up wind-blown from the L train seemed inappropriate. Gianelli's was unmarked, just an elegant door with a small brass nameplate on a quiet street in the Loop. A doorman in a tuxedo greeted her by name. Apparently she was expected, and escorted her through a dimly lit hallway into a private dining room. Vincent was already there, talking quietly with 2 other men. He looked different outside the office, still impeccably dressed but more relaxed, more in his element. When he saw Emily, he smiled and gestured her over. Gentlemen, this is Emily Carter, my new assistant. Emily, this is Robert Morrison and James Chen. Both men were probably in their 50s, expensively dressed with the comfortable confidence of people used to power. They shook her hand, their assessments quick and calculating. Vincent tells us you're already proving invaluable, Morrison said smoothly. High praise from him. Before Emily could respond, the door opened, and a man entered, who commanded immediate attention. Tall, broad-shouldered, with short dark hair, and eyes that seemed to catalog everything in an instant. He moved with precise control, and Emily noticed the slight bulge of something, probably a weapon, under his tailored jacket. Marco, Vincent said warmly, standing to embrace the man. You remember Morrison and Chen? Marco nodded to them, then his gaze landed on Emily. You must be the waitress. It wasn't said unkindly, but it was clearly a test. Emily met his eyes steadily. Former waitress, current assistant to Mr. Marino. A slight smile touched Marco's lips. Good. I was worried you might be too easily intimidated. They sat for dinner, and Emily observed carefully. The conversation flowed between legitimate business topics, real estate development, city politics, investment opportunities, and more carefully worded discussions that she suspected meant something different than they appeared. Morrison mentioned inventory challenges that needed creative logistics solutions. Vincent responded with comments about alternative distribution channels and trusted partners in customs facilitation. To anyone listening casually, it sounded like standard import-on-export talk, but the way they carefully phrased things, the meaningful glances, suggested layers beneath the surface. Emily took notes on her tablet, recording only the surface-level business discussion, understanding instinctively which parts were meant to be documented and which were meant to evaporate into air. During a lull in conversation, Chen turned to her. Ms. Carter, Vincent mentioned you have a business degree. What made you choose to work for Marino Enterprises? It was another test. Emily chose her words carefully. I was looking for an opportunity to work with someone who valued competence and discretion. Mr. Marino offered both, along with the chance to learn aspects of business I wouldn't encounter in conventional corporate environments. Diplomatic, Chen observed with a slight smile. Vincent, you chose well. The dinner lasted 3 hours. By the end, a deal had been struck, though Emily wasn't entirely sure what the deal entailed. Papers were signed, hands were shaken, and Morrison and Chen departed looking satisfied. Only Vincent, Marco, and Emily remained in the private dining room. Well? Vincent asked Marco. Your assessment? Marco studied Emily for a long moment. She's smart, observant, didn't ask stupid questions or panic when the conversation got interesting. She might work out. High praise from Marco, Vincent told Emily with a slight smile. He usually hates everyone I hire. I don't hate them. I just recognize that most people are liabilities waiting to happen. Marco stood buttoning his jacket. But Emily here seems to understand what discretion actually means. That's rare. After Marco left, Vincent walked Emily to the entrance. The November night was cold and snow was starting to fall. The season's first real snowfall. You did very well tonight, Vincent said. Morrison and Chen are important business partners and they're notoriously difficult to impress. But they liked you. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to be doing beyond taking notes. You were being evaluated. They wanted to see if you could be trusted, if you understood the unspoken rules of our world. You passed. He gestured to a waiting car. David will drive you home. Same car will pick you up Monday morning. You shouldn't be taking public transportation at this hour. Emily wanted to protest that she'd been taking late-night trains for years, but she recognized the gesture for what it was. Not condescension, but protection. She was part of Vincent's organization now, which meant she was under his protection. The drive home felt surreal. The heated leather seats, the smooth ride, watching Chicago pass by through tinted windows. Emily lived in a different world now, and she was still figuring out the rules. The weekend passed in strange suspension. Emily's old life and new life felt like they existed in parallel dimensions that hadn't quite merged. She paid her rent, finally, without anxiety. She bought groceries without calculating every dollar. She even splurged on a new winter coat, something warm and professional, something that fit her new role. Monday morning, David picked her up at 7:30. Emily was getting used to the rhythm of her new life. Early starts, long days, work that challenged her mind rather than just exhausting her body. At the office, Vincent called her in immediately. I have a new project for you, a more complex one. He handed her another file, thicker this time. I'm considering a major investment in a restaurant group, 5 establishments across the Chicago area. But the current owner has financial troubles I need to understand before I commit. I need you to analyze their books, identify the problems, and recommend whether I should proceed with the acquisition and under what terms. Emily opened the file, seeing financial statements, tax returns, operational reports. This was real business analysis, the kind of work she'd studied in college but never had the chance to apply. I'll need about a week to do this properly, she said. You have 3 days. This deal has competitors, and I need to move fast if I'm moving at all. Then I'll have it done in 3 days. For the next 72 hours, Emily barely slept. She analyzed cash flows, identified operational inefficiencies, discovered patterns of revenue decline, found evidence of poor management decisions and possibly some creative accounting. She built financial models, projected future performance under different scenarios, calculated fair acquisition prices. Her report was 20 pages of detailed analysis with appendices of supporting data. She delivered it to Vincent at midnight on the 3rd day, finding him still in his office, papers spread across his desk. He read it in silence while Emily stood there, exhausted and nervous. Finally, he looked up. This is exceptional work. You found problems even my accountants missed. Your analysis of the operational issues is spot on, and your recommended acquisition strategy is exactly what I was thinking, but with better supporting arguments. He paused. You're wasted as just an assistant, Emily. This is analyst-level work, possibly consultant level. Does that mean I get a raise? Emily asked, too tired to filter the question. Vincent laughed, a genuine, warm sound she'd rarely heard from him. Yes. We'll discuss your new compensation package tomorrow. For now, go home. David's waiting to drive you. And Emily, thank you. This is exactly the kind of work I need. And you delivered it under pressure. That matters. In the car, Emily leaned against the window watching the city lights blur past. She was exhausted, challenged, pushed beyond what she'd thought she could do. And she'd succeeded. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. Haven't heard from you lately. Everything okay? Emily smiled and typed back, Everything's good, Mom. Better than good. I'll call you this weekend. She'd found something she hadn't realized she'd been searching for. Not just a job, but a purpose. A place where her abilities mattered, where hard work was recognized, where she could be more than she'd been. The risks were real. The moral complexities were undeniable. But for the first time in years, Emily Carter felt like she was living rather than just surviving. And whatever came next, she was ready to face it. The car pulled up to her apartment building. The neighborhood looked different now. Not home anymore. Just the place where she slept before returning to the life that actually mattered. Emily climbed the stairs to her third-floor studio, already thinking about tomorrow's challenges, already looking forward to proving herself again. Behind her, the city continued its endless motion. Millions of stories, millions of choices, millions of people finding their way. And Emily was finally, truly, finding hers. Winter settled over Chicago with brutal efficiency. By mid-December, the city was locked in a grip of cold that made the November chill seem gentle by comparison. Lake Michigan froze along the shoreline, and the wind that whipped between downtown towers felt like it could cut through steel. Emily had been working for Vincent Marino for 6 weeks, and her life had transformed so completely that her time at the diner felt like it belonged to someone else. The exhaustion was different now, mental rather than physical, challenging rather than soul-crushing. She worked 12-hour days regularly, sometimes longer, but every evening brought the satisfaction of having accomplished something meaningful. Her bank account reflected the change too. After paying off 2 months of back rent and the most pressing credit card debt, she'd started saving for the first time since college. The weight of constant financial anxiety had lifted, replaced by a different kind of tension. The awareness that her comfortable new life rested on foundations she didn't fully understand. Vincent had been true to his word about the raise. Her salary was now $90,000 with a promise of bonuses tied to successful project completions. The restaurant acquisition she'd analyzed had gone through, and Vincent had given her credit in front of the entire deal team. Marco had nodded at her with what might have been approval. Sophia Chen, the attorney, had actually smiled. But as Emily learned more about Marino Enterprises, the careful boundaries between legitimate business and something else grew increasingly blurred. It was a Tuesday morning, bitterly cold, when the first crack appeared in Emily's insulated world. She arrived at the office to find the atmosphere changed. Tension in the air. Voices lowered. David's expression carefully neutral as he greeted her. "Mr. Marino wants to see you immediately," he said quietly. Emily hung up her new wool coat, a Christmas gift from her mother, who'd been thrilled to hear her daughter was doing well, and went straight to Vincent's office. He was standing at the window, looking out at the frozen city below. Marco was there too, which was unusual for a morning meeting. Both men turned as she entered, and Emily immediately sensed something was wrong. "Close the door," Vincent said. His voice was controlled, but she heard the edge beneath it. Emily closed the door and sat when Vincent gestured to a chair. Marco remained standing, his posture alert in a way that made her nervous. "We have a situation," Vincent began, moving to sit behind his desk. "One that might affect you directly, which is why I'm telling you about it now." Emily's pulse quickened. "What kind of situation?" "There's another organization in Chicago. I won't name them, it's better you don't know. That's been expanding into territories and business sectors where our interests overlap. We've maintained a professional détente for years, but recently they've become more aggressive, making moves that challenge our operations, approaching our business partners, testing boundaries." Marco spoke, his voice hard. "Yesterday, one of our shipments was intercepted, not by law enforcement, by this other organization. They're sending a message." "What does this have to do with me?" Emily asked, though she was beginning to understand. Vincent's expression was serious. "You've been seen with me, multiple times now, at Gianelli's, at various meetings, entering this building. To outside observers, you're clearly important to my operations, which makes you potentially valuable to people who want to pressure me." The words hung in the air. Emily felt cold despite the office's warmth. "You're saying I might be in danger?" "I'm saying we're taking precautions. Marco has assigned someone to maintain awareness of your movements, not invasively, but enough to ensure you're safe. I'm also arranging for you to move to a more secure building." "Move? Vincent, I can't just—" "You can and you will." His tone was firm but not unkind. "The apartment will be in the Gold Coast neighborhood, fully furnished, significantly better than your current place. I'll cover the rent as part of your compensation package. It's not optional, Emily. I brought you into this world, which means I'm responsible for your safety. Emily stood, pacing to the window, trying to process this. 6 weeks ago, I was worried about making rent. Now I need security because rival business organizations might target me? Yes, Vincent said simply. That's the reality of working in my world. I told you there were risks. This is one of them. Marco moved closer, his expression serious, but not hostile. Emily, listen to me. These people won't harm you. You're more valuable as leverage than as a victim, but they might follow you, approach you, try to recruit you to provide information about Vincent's operations. We need you somewhere secure, and we need you aware of your surroundings at all times. Who exactly are these people? Emily demanded, turning to face both men. Vincent and Marco exchanged a glance. Finally, Vincent spoke. Competitors. People who operate in similar spaces who want what I have. Influence, territory, business relationships. The specifics don't matter. What matters is that you understand the landscape has changed, and you need to be careful. Emily sat down slowly, her mind racing. I need to call my mother. She's planning to visit for Christmas. That's fine, Vincent said. But she stays in a hotel, not at your place. And Marco's people will maintain awareness when she's in the city. We don't take chances with family. The casual way he said family struck Emily. In 6 weeks, she'd become part of something larger than just an employment relationship. She was inside Vincent's circle under his protection, subject to the same risks as everyone else in his organization. I need some air, Emily said quietly. Vincent nodded. Take the morning. David will give you details about the new apartment. You can move this weekend. We'll handle everything. Emily found herself in Millennium Park, sitting on the same bench where she'd sat 6 weeks earlier, trying to decide whether to accept Vincent's offer. The park was nearly empty in the December cold, just a few hardy tourists taking photos of the ice-covered bean sculpture. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Tony. I'm Mr. Marino's driver, and part of your security detail. Black SUV parked on Michigan Avenue if you need anything. So it had already started. She was being watched over, protected, monitored. The thought was simultaneously comforting and claustrophobic. Emily called her mother. Sweetheart, I was just thinking about you. How's the new job? It's good, Mom, really good, but I need to talk to you about Christmas. Is something wrong? Emily chose her words carefully. No, nothing's wrong. But work has gotten more demanding. And I'm moving to a new apartment this weekend. Would you be okay staying at a hotel when you visit? I'll pay for it. My company has arrangements with some nice places downtown. Emily, are you sure everything's all right? You sound stressed. I'm fine, Mom, honestly. The job is it's a bigger deal than I expected. My boss takes security seriously, and there are protocols I need to follow. But I'm safe, I'm making good money, and I'm finally using my degree. Her mother was silent for a moment. Okay, but Emily, if anything feels wrong, if you're uncomfortable or unsafe, you tell me. Promise? I promise. I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart. Emily ended the call and sat there, watching Chicago move around her. The city that had felt so hostile when she was struggling now felt different. Not friendlier exactly, but more comprehensible. She understood now that there were layers to everything, visible worlds and invisible ones, official narratives and actual operations. She returned to the office after lunch to find David waiting with a folder. The new apartment. It's ready for you to view this evening if you'd like. The apartment was on the 30th floor of a luxury building with a doorman, security cameras, and controlled access. When Emily stepped inside, she understood why Vincent had insisted. The place was beautiful. Hardwood floors, modern kitchen, floor-to-ceiling windows with lake views, a bedroom separate from the living space. It was 3 times the size of her current studio and probably cost 5 times as much. This is too much, Emily said quietly. David, who'd accompanied her for the viewing, shook his head. It's what Mr. Marino considers appropriate for someone in your position. And more importantly, it's secure. Limited access points, 24-hour doorman, cameras in all common areas. You'll be safe here. Emily walked to the windows, looking out at the city lights reflecting off the frozen lake. Her old life kept receding, replaced by this new existence of luxury and hidden dangers, opportunity and complication. I'll take it, she said. The move happened that Saturday. Emily had expected to do it herself, but Vincent sent a team of movers who packed her entire studio in 2 hours and had everything set up in the new apartment by afternoon. They even arranged her books and clothes, hung her art on the walls, made it feel like home. Marco appeared as the movers were finishing, doing a walkthrough of the apartment with professional thoroughness. He checked the windows, the locks, the sight lines from various positions. "Good building," he said finally. "Keep your curtains closed at night so people can't track your patterns. Vary your route to work. Pay attention to anyone who appears in your vicinity multiple times. Basic awareness." "This feels paranoid," Emily said. "It's not paranoia if people are actually watching." Marco's expression softened slightly. "Look, I know this is a lot to process, but Vincent doesn't bring people into his inner circle lightly. The fact that he's taking these precautions means he values you. Take that seriously." After Marco left, Emily stood in her new apartment surrounded by her modest possessions that looked even more modest in this space. She thought about calling her old roommate from college, but what would she say? "I work for a mysterious businessman who operates in gray areas, and now I need security because rival organizations might target me." Her mother arrived 2 days later, staying at the Palmer House Hilton, which Emily paid for without flinching, still amazed by her financial stability. They had dinner at a nice restaurant, and her mother was full of questions about the new job, the apartment, the sudden upward mobility. "I'm so proud of you, honey," her mother said over dessert. "After those years struggling at the diner, you deserve this success. Your boss must think very highly of you." "He does," Emily said carefully. "He's been very generous. Just remember, you worked hard for this. You earned it." Emily smiled, but inside she wondered if that was true. Had she earned this, or had she simply been in the right place at the right time? Sending an email to the wrong person. Was she skilled, or just lucky? And what would happen when her luck ran out? 3 days before Christmas, Vincent called Emily into his office for a private meeting. She'd learned to read his moods by now, and today he seemed unusually serious. "I have something to tell you," he began. "Something you need to know before we go any further in our working relationship." Emily sat down, tension building in her chest. "The organization I mentioned, the one that's been testing boundaries, they've made contact with someone in my circle, trying to gather information, find weaknesses. It's happened before, it'll happen again. But this time they asked specifically about you." Emily's blood went cold. What did they want to know? Your background, your relationship to me, whether you might be vulnerable to recruitment. Vincent's expression was hard. "I'm telling you this because I need you to understand the stakes. These aren't casual competitors. They're serious people who play for serious stakes. What do they want? What everyone wants. Power, territory, leverage. They think they can use you to get to me, either by recruiting you or by threatening you. Neither is going to happen, but you need to be alert." Emily stood and walked to the window, looking down at the city far below. "Vincent, I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer." "All right. What exactly do you do?" "I know the official version. Import, export, real estate, investments. But what's underneath that? What am I actually part of?" Vincent was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was measured. "I facilitate transactions that can't happen through conventional channels. I connect people who need things with people who can provide them. I manage information, relationships, and influence in ways that exist outside traditional business structures." "That's still vague." "It has to be. The moment I give you specific information, you become liable for that knowledge. Right now, you can honestly say you don't know details of certain operations. That's protection for you, Emily. The less you know about certain aspects of my business, the safer you are if questions are ever asked." "Questions by whom? Law enforcement?" "By anyone. My competitors, authorities, even people in my own organization who might have divided loyalties." Vincent stood and moved closer to her. "I brought you in because you were outside this world. That outsider status is valuable. Don't trade it for knowledge that could compromise you." Emily turned to face him. "But I'm not outside anymore, am I? I'm living in a luxury apartment you're paying for. I'm earning more money than I ever imagined. People are watching me because of my association with you. I crossed over weeks ago. There are degrees of involvement. You're involved, yes, but you're not implicated. That's an important distinction. And if that changes, if at some point I need to choose sides, make decisions that have serious consequences." Vincent met her eyes steadily. "Then I trust you to make the right choice. That's why I hired you, Emily. Not just because you're competent, but because you have integrity. Even if that integrity someday works against me, I'd rather have someone like you close than someone who can be bought or intimidated." It was the most honest conversation they'd had. Emily felt the weight of it, the trust implicit in Vincent's words. "I'm not going anywhere," she said finally. "Whatever's coming, whatever complications arise, I'm in this. But I need you to promise me something. What? No more surprises. If there's danger, I want to know. If decisions affect me, I want to be consulted. I can handle truth better than I can handle being protected from it. Vincent considered this, then nodded. Agreed. Full transparency, within the bounds of what's safe for you to know. You're not just an employee anymore, Emily. You're part of this operation and you deserve to be treated as such. Christmas Eve arrived with heavy snow. Emily's mother had returned to Wisconsin, full of pride about her daughter's success and only mild concern about the vague nature of Emily's work. Emily spent the evening alone in her apartment, watching the city disappear under white, thinking about how dramatically her life had changed. Her phone rang. Vincent's number. Merry Christmas, Emily. Merry Christmas. I thought you'd be with family. I am. Marco and Sophia are here. We're about to have dinner and we realized you're probably alone. Come join us. David will pick you up in 20 minutes. Vincent, I don't want to impose. You're not imposing. You're family now. That's how this works. 20 minutes. The line went dead. Emily looked at her reflection in the dark window. A woman in comfortable clothes, alone on Christmas Eve in a luxury apartment. Then she smiled and went to get dressed. David drove her to a brownstone in Lincoln Park, a beautiful historic building that Emily hadn't known Vincent owned. Inside, the atmosphere was warm and surprisingly normal. Marco was cooking in the kitchen. Apparently, he was an excellent cook. Sophia was setting the table, dressed casually for once. Vincent was opening wine, looking more relaxed than Emily had ever seen him. Welcome, he said, handing her a glass. To new family. They toasted, and Emily felt something settle inside her. These people, this strange, complicated, sometimes dangerous circle, had become her world. Whatever moral complexities existed, whatever risks lurked beneath the surface, this was where she belonged now. Dinner was loud and warm, full of stories about Chicago, about growing up on the South Side, about deals that had gone well, and disasters that had been narrowly avoided. Marco told embarrassing stories about young Vincent. Sophia shared her path from law school to becoming Vincent's attorney. Emily contributed her own stories, the diner, her struggles, the moment she'd sent that fateful email. Best typo you ever made, Marco said, raising his glass. Best typo I ever received, Vincent added. As the evening wore on and snow continued to fall outside, Emily realized she was happy. Genuinely, completely happy. The complications and risks were real, but so was this. Belonging, community, purpose. Around midnight, she stood by the window with Vincent, watching the snow-covered city. Thank you, she said quietly, for all of this, for taking a chance on me. Thank you for saying yes, for trusting me enough to enter this world. Vincent paused. Whatever comes next, Emily, and things will get complicated. Remember tonight. Remember that at the core of all this business and strategy and careful maneuvering, there are real people who care about each other. That matters more than anything else. Emily nodded, understanding the deeper message. Loyalty wasn't about business. It was about the people you chose to stand with when everything became difficult, and she'd made her choice. Outside, Chicago slept under its blanket of snow, beautiful and brutal, and full of secrets. Emily Carter, former waitress, now part of Vincent Marino's inner circle, watched over it with new eyes. She'd crossed a line she couldn't uncross, entered a world she couldn't leave, but standing here, surrounded by people who'd become her family, she found she had no regrets. The price of loyalty, she was learning, wasn't always paid in compromises. Sometimes it was paid in commitment, in choosing to stand with people even when the path ahead was uncertain. And Emily was discovering she had more strength for that journey than she'd ever known. The new year was coming, and with it, challenges she couldn't yet imagine. But tonight, on Christmas Eve, in a warm house with people who'd become her family, Emily Carter allowed herself to simply be present, to be grateful, to be home. Whatever tomorrow brought, she'd face it. Not alone, but surrounded by the complicated, dangerous, loyal family she'd found in the most unexpected way. The snow kept falling, covering everything in white, making the world seem clean and new. And inside, the warmth continued. Laughter and stories and the bonds that form between people who choose to trust each other in a world that gives them every reason not to. This was her life now, and despite everything, Emily wouldn't change it. January brought bitter cold and the consequences Emily had been warned about. She was leaving the office late on a Thursday evening, exhausted from analyzing a complex property deal, when a man approached her in the parking garage. He was well-dressed, professional, completely unthreatening in appearance, which was precisely what made Emily's instincts flare with warning. "Ms. Carter, could I have a moment of your time?" Emily's hand moved to her phone, ready to call Tony, who was waiting in the SUV 30 feet away. "I don't think we've met." "We haven't. My name is Agent Ross, FBI. He showed her credentials quickly. Too quickly to read, but she caught the badge. "I'd like to talk to you about your employer, Vincent Marino." Emily's heart hammered, but she kept her expression neutral, remembering Marco's advice. "Say nothing without an attorney present." "I don't discuss my work with anyone. If you have questions about Marino Enterprises, I suggest you contact our legal department." "Ms. Carter, you're not in trouble. But we believe Vincent Marino is involved in activities that you might not be fully aware of. We'd like to offer you protection and possibly immunity in exchange for cooperation." The word immunity hung in the cold air. Emily understood immediately. They were asking her to betray Vincent, to provide information that would be used against him. "I have nothing to say to you. Please don't approach me again without an attorney present." She walked past him toward the SUV, her legs shaking but her stride steady. Tony was out of the vehicle before she reached it, his expression hard as he assessed the man in the garage. "Everything all right, Ms. Carter?" "Fine. Let's go." As they pulled away, Emily saw Agent Ross watching, his expression unreadable. She waited until they were blocks away before speaking. "That man said he was FBI. He wanted information about Vincent." Tony's jaw tightened. "Mr. Marino needs to know about this immediately." 20 minutes later, Emily sat in Vincent's office with Marco and Sophia present. She recounted the entire encounter word for word, while Sophia took notes. "You did exactly right," Vincent said when she finished. "You engaged minimally, refused to answer questions, and removed yourself from the situation. But they approached me, Vincent. Federal agents are investigating you, and now they know I'm close enough to you to be valuable." Sophia spoke, her legal mind already working. "This is a fishing expedition." They approached Emily in a semi-public space, identified themselves quickly, made vague offers. They're testing to see if she'll bite, if she's vulnerable to recruitment. "And if I'm not?" Emily asked. Marco answered. "Then they might apply pressure. Nothing illegal. They won't threaten you directly, but they'll make it known that cooperation is available if you want it. They'll suggest that Vincent is using you, that you're in danger, that loyalty is foolish when you could have immunity." Emily felt the walls closing in. 6 weeks ago, her biggest problem was an abusive boss at a diner. Now federal agents were recruiting her as an informant against a man who'd become something between an employer and family. "What do I do?" she asked quietly. Vincent stood and walked to the window, his back to them. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "You do what's right for you, Emily. If you want to cooperate with them, if you want immunity and protection, I understand. I won't hold it against you." "Vincent," he turned to face her, "I'm serious. You didn't sign up for federal investigations. You sent a resignation email to the wrong address, and I pulled you into a world you didn't choose. If you want out, this is your chance. Clean exit, no complications." Emily stood, anger rising. "Do you really think I'd do that after everything?" "I think you'd be smart to consider it. They're not wrong, Emily. I have operated in gray areas. There are aspects of my business that cross lines. You could testify truthfully about things you've observed and walk away from all of this, and betray you in the process. It wouldn't be betrayal. It would be self-preservation." Emily moved closer to him, her voice intense. 6 weeks ago I was drowning. You gave me an opportunity when I had nothing. You paid me fairly, treated me with respect, welcomed me into your circle. Marco and Sophia and Tony. They've become my family. You've become my family. And you think I'd trade that for immunity from crimes I haven't committed?" Vincent's expression softened. "I'm giving you a choice. That's all. Then here's my choice. I'm not talking to the FBI. I'm not providing information. I'm staying right here, doing my job, standing with the people who stood with me." Emily paused. "But I need to know, are you in serious danger? Is this investigation something that could actually hurt you?" Sophia answered. "Federal investigations are always serious. But Vincent has been careful. Legitimate businesses, proper documentation, layers of protection. They're looking, but we've made sure there's nothing definitive to find. Then we handle it," Emily said firmly. "Together." Marco smiled slightly. The first time Emily had seen genuine warmth from him. "Told you she'd be solid." The next 2 weeks were tense. Emily varied her routes, stayed alert, and reported any unusual approaches immediately. Agent Ross appeared twice more, once outside her apartment building, once at a coffee shop near the office. Each time, Emily refused to engage and contacted Sophia immediately. "They're persistent," Sophia noted after the third encounter. "But they're not escalating. That's actually good news. It means they don't have enough to compel testimony." Meanwhile, Emily's work continued. She analyzed deals, managed schedules, coordinated meetings. Her competence had become indispensable to Vincent's operations, and he relied on her judgment increasingly. In late January, during a private meeting, Vincent told her something that changed everything. "I'm transitioning the business," he said quietly, "moving away from the gray areas, focusing exclusively on legitimate operations. Real estate, investments, consulting. It's going to take 2 years, maybe 3, but I'm done operating in shadows." Emily stared at him. "Why?" "Because I'm tired. Because the risks aren't worth the rewards anymore. Because I want to build something that can exist in daylight." He paused. "And because you reminded me that there's value in integrity. You walked away from a bad situation on principle. Maybe it's time I did the same." "Vincent, you don't have to do this for me. I'm not. I'm doing it for myself. You just helped me remember who I wanted to be before circumstances made me someone else." Spring arrived slowly, Chicago thawing reluctantly. By April, the FBI had stopped approaching Emily. Sophia's aggressive legal responses had apparently convinced them she wasn't going to cooperate. Vincent's transition was underway. Several questionable business relationships had been quietly ended. Legitimate enterprises were expanded. Marco had taken on a more formal role as head of corporate security. Sophia was restructuring contracts and partnerships to ensure everything was above board. One morning, Emily received an email from an unfamiliar address. The subject line read, "Job opportunity." She opened it cautiously. It was from Jerry Collins. "Emily, I heard you're doing well. Good for you. Rosie's Diner closed last month. I couldn't keep it going. I'm working at a chain restaurant now, and it's taught me a lot about how badly I managed my own place. I owe you an apology. You were a good employee, and I treated you terribly. I was threatened by your competence and took it out on you instead of learning from you. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that you were right to quit, and I hope wherever you are now you're treated with the respect you deserved from me. Jerry Collins." Emily read it twice, feeling something release inside her. She'd carried anger toward Jerry for years, but now it felt distant and unimportant. He was just a scared man who'd wielded the little power he had badly. She'd moved so far beyond that world that it barely touched her now. She didn't respond to the email. Some chapters closed without needing final words. 6 months after that first email mishap, Emily sat in Vincent's office reviewing quarterly financials. The numbers told a story of transformation. Declining revenue from questionable sources, increasing income from legitimate businesses. The transition was working. "We're going to make it," Vincent said, studying the same numbers. 2 years from now, Marino Enterprises will be completely clean. I'll be just another Chicago businessman with real estate holdings and investment portfolios. Will you miss it? Emily asked. The excitement? The edge? Vincent smiled. I'm 42, Emily. I've had enough excitement for one lifetime. Now I want stability, legacy, something I can be proud of without qualifications. You should be proud. You're choosing the harder path. We're choosing it. None of this happens without you. Your integrity reminded me of my own. Your courage in standing with me when you could have walked away. That mattered more than you know. Emily stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city she'd struggled in, suffered in, and finally found her place in. I sent that email to the wrong address on one of the worst days of my life, and it turned into the best mistake I ever made. Not a mistake, Vincent said quietly. A beginning. Epilogue. 2 years later. The conference room buzzed with energy. Emily stood at the head of the table, presenting to a room full of investors. She'd been promoted to Director of Business Development, overseeing Marino Enterprises' expansion into new markets. Her presentation was sharp, professional, confident. Vincent watched from the back of the room, pride evident in his expression. Marco stood beside him, now officially Chief of Corporate Security with business cards and everything. Sophia had become General Counsel, managing an entire legal team. After the presentation, after handshakes and congratulations, Emily found herself alone with Vincent in his office. Remember when I couldn't even afford rent? She said, laughing. I remember a woman who wrote the most brutally honest resignation email I'd ever read. who took a chance on a mysterious offer from a stranger, who stood by her principles when it would have been easier to walk away. I remember being terrified of you. And now? Now you're family, the complicated, sometimes frustrating, ultimately loyal family I chose. Vincent smiled. The waitress who quit via email, the Mafia boss who hired her. They both laughed. Vincent had never actually confirmed or denied that label, and Emily had learned it didn't matter. What mattered was who they'd become, who they were choosing to be. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "So proud of you, sweetheart. My daughter, the business executive." Emily smiled. Her mother didn't know the full story, probably never would, but she knew her daughter was successful, happy, and surrounded by people who cared about her. That was enough. Outside, Chicago gleamed in the summer sunlight. The city that had almost broken Emily now felt like home. Not because it had become gentler, but because she'd become stronger. Not because the risks had disappeared, but because she'd learned she was brave enough to face them. That wrong email address had led her here, to a corner office in a building she'd once entered nervously, to a family she'd found in the most unexpected place, to a version of herself she hadn't known existed. Sometimes the changes we fear most are the ones that set us free. Emily had learned that truth the hard way, through federal investigations and dangerous complications and late-night decisions that could have destroyed everything. But she'd also learned that loyalty, real loyalty, wasn't blind obedience. It was choosing to stand with people who'd earned your trust even when easier paths presented themselves. It was growing together, changing together, becoming better together. Vincent Marino had given her an opportunity when she'd needed it most. In return, Emily Carter had reminded him who he wanted to be. They'd saved each other in their own complicated way. And now, 2 years after that fateful email, they stood in an office overlooking Chicago, two people who'd found redemption in each other's integrity. "Thank you," Emily said quietly. "For what?" "For replying. For seeing something in me I couldn't see in myself. For giving me the chance to become this person." Vincent's expression was warm. "Thank you for taking that chance. For trusting me when you had every reason not to. For reminding me that it's never too late to choose integrity over convenience." They stood there in comfortable silence, watching the city that had witnessed their transformation. Chicago, with all its complexity and contradiction, had been the backdrop for their story, a story that started with a typo and became something neither could have predicted. The waitress had become an executive, the Mafia boss had become a legitimate businessman, and together, they'd built something worth having, a life defined not by where they'd started, but by who they'd chosen to become. Outside, the city continued its endless motion, and inside, two people who'd found each other through the most unlikely circumstance stood together, looking toward a future they'd created through courage, loyalty, and the belief that change, real change, was always possible. Sometimes, Emily thought, the wrong address leads you exactly where you need to be.